week's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that WBO champion Emmanuel Navarette has filed a formal request for WBO Super Champion status, and I believe that that request will be accepted. It will be met.
Not but a few days ago, another one of Top Rank's fighters, Teofimo Lopez, he petitioned for WBO Super Champion status, and it was granted.
And now Emmanuel is looking for the same thing. The three-division and reigning junior lightweight titleist has placed a formal request to receive Super Champion distinction from the WBO, whose titles he has held in some capacity for nearly 5 years. The sanctioning body has acknowledged the receipt of the official submission and will begin its review process. The reason for this document is to request to you and the WBO to consider Emmanuel Vaquero Navarette to be elevated to the category of Super Champion of 130 pounds. Alejandro Brito, Navarette's manager and head of BXSTRS Promotions, declared to the WBO in a letter obtained by BoxingScene.com. Navarette has been a loyal boxer to the organization, and in less than 5 years, he has been able to win 3 titles in 3 different divisions.
You know, they awarded WBO Super Champion status to Teofimo, who's been WBO champion at 2 weights. Navarette's been WBO champion at 3.
Mexico's Navarette is coming off his most notable win to date, a 12-round unanimous decision win over his countryman and former 2-division champion, Oscar Valdez. Their August 12th ESPN headliner at the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona, saw the 28-year-old San Juan native turn their anticipated Fight of the Year contender into a showcase performance.
He dominated Oscar.
The win saw Navarette extend his current 33-fight winning streak, which dates back to December of 2012. He is now 12-0, 7 KOs in title fights at junior featherweight, and junior lightweight.
He really stepped up, and I wasn't expecting that. Not behind what we saw in the Liam Wilson fight, which was his first fight at the weight.
Not his best performance. A far cry from what we ended up seeing in the Oscar Valdez fight, which followed. He completely dominated Oscar Valdez. His alignment with Top Rank has seen all of his title fights carry ESPN affiliation, whether it's on its main network, its ESPN Plus streaming service, or on its pay-per-view arm. All 12 career title fights have come with the WBO title at stake. The win over Valdez bolstered his claim for facing opponents of high recognition and high skills. Among the benefits afforded to a WBO Super Champion is the flexibility to extend the period between mandatory title defenses and the freedom to pursue more significant and legacy-defining fights. The designation also allows its claimants to petition for immediate mandatory challenges status in another weight class, or even their own, in the event they lose the physical WBO title in the ring.
That's what this is about. This is about being able to move up in weight as the mandatory challenger.
So we're not there yet. Emmanuel Navarette is not on the eve of leaving super featherweight just 2 fights in. He just got there, and they've already got his next fight lined up. Emmanuel Navarette is reportedly now in advanced talks to defend his WBO super featherweight world title versus Brazil's own Robson Conceicao on the Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos undercard, November 16th in Vegas.
It's a good fight.
The rest assured, if they've petitioned for WBO Super Champion status, it's because they don't plan on having an extended stay at 130 pounds. The unification matches, what it would take to make them, would require cooperation from rival promotional outfits. You know, the WBA title, that's over there at the PBC. Hector Luis Garcia, he's got it.
Would he cross over to Top Rank to unify with Emmanuel?
What about Joe Cordina? He's going to be in action very soon in Monte Carlo. He's got the IBF title.
How much money would it take to make that fight? How much money would it take to bring him to America to unify with Emmanuel?
You can forget about Ashaki Foster. He's got a mandated title fight coming up against Eduardo Rocky Hernandez.
In defense of his WBC title, let's see if he can hang on to it.
Essentially what I'm getting at is the world title situation at 130 pounds is very much divided. There are political boundary lines that determine what fights are feasible and what fights are not feasible. And in an ideal world,
we'd see more bipartisanship among the promoters to make these fights happen, but things are less than ideal in the world of boxing. Thus,
Emmanuel Navarette is charting a course, already starting to chart a course north of 130 pounds, likely beyond the Robson-Conceicao fight.
To challenge that division's WBO champion, whosoever it might be, after Devin Haney vacates the WBO title. You will notice that both Shakur Stevenson and Vasyl Lomachenko are ranked at number 1 and 2.
Shakur Stevenson is already charted a course to take on Edwin De Los Santos for what is the newly vacated WBC title, and who knows? Perhaps Vasyl Lomachenko might end up fighting for the WBO upon his return, at which point Emmanuel Navarette might challenge him.
We're talking several months down the line, several months from now, well into the following year.
He's not about to move up, not yet. He's about to fight Robson-Conceicao, but beyond that, there may not be much reason to stay at 130 pounds.
Hence petitioning for WBO Super Champion status.
He'll have to contend with Robson-Conceicao first, the common opponent between him and Oscar Valdez, and let's see how Emmanuel performs. Let's see how we rate that performance before what is his ascent to 135.
Gotta crawl before you walk.
Upstairs at Welter, insights into what's next for Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, their proposed rematch. It was a Twitter account that goes by the name According to Boxing, a friend of the channel, that stated, Crawford doesn't owe Spence a rematch at 154.
He doesn't.
The same people that want Crawford to fight Spence at 154 are the same people who created excuses for the initial win and claimed that something was wrong with Spence. The same people who wanted Crawford to fight Porter
Made excuses for that.
made excuses for Sean. I've no doubts. If Terence did fight Errol at 154 and he beat him again, I've no doubts that he would.
They'd still make excuses. They're still making excuses for Deontay Wilder.
For Deontay Wilder's 2 back-to-back defeats to Tyson Fury. In his initial loss to Tyson Fury, they accused Tyson Fury of glove tampering, of cheating, with no evidence to substantiate that claim.
None.
Only so that when Tyson Fury fights him again, fights him for a 3rd time, and beats him again, they still make excuses.
They'd do the same with this.
It's not actually a requisite that you accept Errol Spence Jr.'s defeat for him.
Still lost. You can't change it.
You can't do nothing about it. To that, Stephen So Cold Nelson caught wind of these comments by way of According to Boxing and stated, facts. And to all the people out there spreading false narratives, Bud is offering Errol a fight at 147. If he doesn't take it, which we're hoping he doesn't, because it's a waste of time, Bud wants to do something that's never been done and move up 3 weight classes to beat Canelo.
He's over Errol Spence Jr. That chapter of his career is closed, as that matter has been settled. It was settled in the ring.
It's important to note that it's not like Errol Spence Jr. is making any of these excuses himself. These excuses are being made on his behalf.
He took his loss like a man. He didn't make any excuses.
And while Terence Crawford is contractually obligated to give him a rematch if he wants one, the weight at which the contest takes place is up to Terence. It's up to Terence Crawford, not Errol Spence Jr.
That's what's in the contract.
Alongside the rematch clause. So if you really want your rematch, you can get it, but you'll get it at 147?
Or no fight.
It's your choice. I don't actually see the point in a second fight outside of there being a rematch clause. I don't actually see a reason to have to do it again and run it back, not competitively, commercially.
Sporting-wise or business-wise. It's not like the second fight is going to do more buys than the first one did.
Nope.
The first one was too lopsided.
It's not like the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury trilogy, because they at least had the controversy from the first fight to help sell the second. And in the second fight,
They had the Glovegate conspiracy to help sell the third.
none of those elements. There's no controversy in play here to help sell a second fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr.
It's a pointless rematch.
Nothing about Errol Spence Jr.'s performance in their initial meeting warrants a second fight. I don't need to see it. I'd much rather see Terence Crawford move up in weight and challenge the winner of Zoo versus Mendoza en route to a potential Canelo fight. I don't actually want to see a second Errol Spence Jr. fight.
Now use your WBO Super Champion status to force a fight with the winner of that fight, with the winner of Mendoza versus Zoo, whoever it is.
En route to 168, en route to the winner of Canelo versus Charlo, which, for me and my money, I think is going to be Canelo. I think it's going to be Canelo Alvarez that wins that fight.
Just ask yourself a question.
What?
If the shoe was on the other foot and the roles were reversed and it were Terence Crawford that lost the first fight, do you think they'd have this much consideration for Terence Crawford.
Of course not. You know the answer.
You know they wouldn't.
The fight is over, and the matter is settled. There is no errant mystery, no air of intrigue in association with the second fight, except the last gasp.
A last-ditch effort to try to save face for a bunch of sore fucking losers.
From a bunch of fucking sore losers, praying on their rosary beads, hoping Errol can perform a miracle, that it'll be a completely different fight based on the weight, based on it being at 154.
Terence was open to that idea at first. I saw it, but he changed his mind.
And he's well within his rights to do it, because I reiterate, the initial contract states that while the loser is entitled to the rematch, the winner picks the weight. The winner picks the weight at which the contest takes place.
People at the PBC and Showtime should be breathing a sigh of relief that Terence doesn't actually want to do a rematch.
He's using that stipulation in order to get out of it, because they're the ones that would have to bankroll the show. They're the ones that would have to pay for that fight.
Right.
The bubble being burst from around them. What do you think that would have did at the box office? What do you think that would have did at the gate? The first fight was too lopsided. At no moment in that thing, in the 9 rounds that it lasted, was it competitive.
There's no point in doing it again. You'd be wasting your time. Moreover, you'd be wasting your money.
Showtime really should be breathing a sigh of relief that they may not have to pay for a second fight.
Right.
I only wonder how Terence Crawford plans on spending the time. Does he plan on taking a fight in between now and what could be a Canelo Alvarez fight, or a Jermel Charlo fight, if he upsets the apple cart for Canelo?
No, I don't think he will, but it's a possibility that we have to entertain.
There's bigger fish to fry than Errol Spence Jr. at this point. We've already been there and done that.
Served him over rice.
The slice of lime. It's time to move on. Elsewhere in the world of welterweight boxing, former WBA champion Yordenis Ugas says, I was training to fight Thurman. I have no idea why that fight got undone.
We heard rumors about it for weeks, and then news broke that Ugas would be fighting Barrios instead.
The Cuban-born, Las Vegas-based Ugas never received a straight answer as to why his fight with Thurman fell apart. I was training to fight Thurman, Ugas told BoxingScene.com through a translator. I was practically sure the fight was going to happen. I have no idea why that fight got undone, but I'm here and I'm ready for this next challenge, and it's going to be a great one.
We'll see.
The 37-year-old Ugas hasn't boxed since Errol Spence beat him by 10th round technical knockout in their welterweight title unification fight in April of last year. That's saying it's been well over a year's time since Ugas had a fight.
I so often hear Errol Spence Jr.'s supporters and the Haymanites saying that the fight would have never taken this long to make had Terence Crawford crossed over to the PBC sooner, but look at how the guys on that side ended up.
Errol Spence Jr. was coming off over a year of inactivity going into the Crawford fight. Keith Thurman's been out for over a year as well, and Ugas.
And Danny.
Danny Garcia, who was last in action in July of last year, he's been out for over a year's time as well. He literally had an emotional breakdown after decisioning Jose Benavidez.
You're saying Crawford should have crossed over sooner so he can end up like those guys? Inactive?
And irrelevant. Keith Thurman, who doesn't have a fight scheduled, hasn't fought since he beat Barrios by way of a unanimous decision in their 12-round welterweight bout 19 months ago at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino's Michelob Ultra Arena in Las Vegas.
19 months. That's almost 2 years.
Close to 2 years of inactivity, and what you're telling me is that Crawford should have crossed over to the PBC sooner so he can end up like those guys? Have them handling his career.
No, gracias.
I wanted Thurman, Ugas said. I don't know what happened to Thurman, but Barrios is a great fighter. I'm happy to fight with Barrios. Barrios is strong. He's a great fighter. He's a former world champion.
No, he's not.
He held a secondary title at 140 pounds. The reigning undisputed champion at the time that he held that title was Josh Taylor.
He was the champion.
Only when it comes to PBC fighters do they try to classify these secondary titles as full-fledged world titles. Barrios was not a world champion.
Let's get it straight.
Was boxing insider Rick Glacier who speculated that the reason Thurman versus Ugas fell apart was because Keith Thurman priced himself out of the fight. And I can believe that because even Ugas isn't sure what happened.
So maybe Thurman can land that Spence fight after all.
It was Demetrius Andrade who stated, "You can't get mad at yourself for losing against the very best."
What's that got to do with Keith Thurman?
Well, when you think about it, it's clear now that Terrence doesn't feel like wasting time on an Errol Spence Jr. rematch. And if Errol chooses to forego that rematch based on the weight,
Keith Thurman is free.
Errol can fight him. It was Demetrius Andrade that stated, "There's nothing wrong with him daring to be great again. Go give it your second best, and whatever happens, happens." He isn't picking sides, but Andrade cringes at the thought of Spence versus Crawford Part 2. Competitive isn't a word Andrade would use to describe their first meeting, but he does understand why Spence has decided to try and do it again. What is confusing, however, was the Dallas native's response just minutes after referee Harvey Dock waved off their first clash. The smile Spence normally sports after his ring appearances was gone. It was replaced by a look of despondency and disbelief. He walked into his locker room, sat on his stool.
We saw it.
The bottom line is Terrence don't want to waste time on a second fight with Errol. That's why he's choosing to do it at 147, so that Errol will go the other way.
And he should.
Demetrius added, "To lose against somebody who was undisputed in 2 weight classes and that's undefeated, you can't get mad at yourself for losing against the very best person. It's nothing to be ashamed of."
It would be foolhardy for Errol Spence Jr. to run it back with Terrence Crawford at the same weight that the first contest took place.
And it would be foolhardy for Showtime and the PBC to try to put it on, to try to bankroll that show. There is nothing else to see and nothing else to gain in putting the both of those fighters in the same ring. So I see the strategy.
Terrence wants to move on.
So maybe you do an Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman fight at 154 pounds, which will be a healthier weight for Errol Spence Jr. and a decent-sized fight for Keith Thurman. Even though Keith Thurman,
He trashed the version of Errol Spence Jr. that Terrence Crawford fought. Don't know how much credit you're supposed to give him if he swoops in and fights him afterwards.
but beggars can't be choosers, and Keith Thurman doesn't have a fight lined up. No prospects on the horizon. So an Errol Spence Jr. fight would be the biggest bang for your buck fight available for that fighter.
And the most opportune fight for that fighter. He's already been out 19 months.
The usual suspects are gonna moan about it.
That Errol might not get his rematch?
But the paying public and the predominant boxing community at large, much like myself, don't see the need for a second fight. It's just a pointless formality.
Maybe that was Errol trying to cash out. One last hoorah before he calls it a career.
Maybe it was that, or maybe it's just pride. Plain old pride. He doesn't want to accept defeat.
It's not up to him.
The matter is settled, and the fight is over.
Done.
You fight Terrence Crawford again. If you fight him again, 147 or 154, he's just gonna beat you again.
Though now that he's decided he wants it at 147,
There's just no point in running it back.